They always told you that to be desired, you need to be beautiful, kind, and caring. But Machiavelli would laugh at that, because he knew, centuries before Instagram, that real power lies not in pleasing, but in creating tension. Desire is not born of beauty, it is born of mystery. And mystery is not absence, it is strategy. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that human beings do not want what they have. They want what they almost understand. And that's why some men, even without saying a word, are remembered for weeks, while others, who do everything right, are forgotten within minutes. Attraction is a silent war, and most enter it unarmed. You don't need muscles or ready-made phrases. Needs awareness. To understand how real human nature works, the one that Machiavelli studied in kings, generals, and lovers. Ultimately, the game is the same. Whoever controls perceptions controls the outcome. Whoever arouses curiosity arouses desire, and whoever learns to be feared without being hated is the one who never needs to chase after it again. In this video, you'll discover the 5 Machiavellian rules that make women silently desire you. These are not tricks, they are psychological principles that shape behavior. You will learn to transform the way you are seen, use the power of absence, and awaken desire without losing respect. But be careful. The knowledge that frees you also makes you dangerous, because once you understand these laws, there is no going back to being the same. When Machiavelli wrote about power, he perhaps didn't imagine that his ideas would span centuries and apply even to the invisible dynamics of attraction. But that's exactly what happens. The same principle that makes a prince govern a people also makes a man govern his own energy in front of a woman. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, is also the art of seeing desire as a game of perception. It's not about being perfect. It's about being perceived as someone who knows their own worth. And as the Florentine said, men judge more by their eyes than by their hands. In attraction, this means before you can be loved, you need to be felt. Before you can be chosen, you need to become impossible to ignore. The mistake most people make is trying to be loved immediately. And this is exactly the opposite of what Machiavelli would call the calculated use of force. He would teach that power, whether political or emotional, is built in layers. First comes mystery, then respect, and only then desire. The end justifies the means, but the end here is silent conquest, and the means is how you conduct yourself. To be predictable is to die of emotional boredom. To be a strategist is to master timing, knowing when to retreat, when to appear, and when to remain silent. A simple delay in responding to a message, if done consciously, can generate more impact than 100 impulsive statements. The man who understands this stops chasing and begins to create a movement around himself. The Machiavellian rule of attraction is simple. Control the game, but don't show that you're playing. The appearance of virtue is more powerful than the virtue itself. Being seen as a just, focused, selective, and emotionally centered man creates an image of worth that requires no explanation. And the curious thing is that this doesn't require coldness, but strategy. It's like in The Prince. Machiavelli never advocated wickedness, but lucidity. He simply understood that the world doesn't reward those who act out of purity, but rather those who understand true human nature. In attraction, this means accepting that female desire isn't driven by logic. It's driven by the perception of strength and scarcity. And the man who understands this ceases to be ordinary and becomes magnetic. But there's a subtlety that separates the strategist from the manipulator. The former acts with virtù, the latter with desperation. Virtù is the ability to shape one's own fate, to combine coolness and charisma, distance and presence. It's what makes a leader inspire loyalty without begging for it, and what makes a man inspire desire without needing to beg for attention. It's self-mastery that creates the illusion of control over another. Want a practical example? Observe how a man who pays attention to his posture, silence, and gaze commands respect before saying a word. This is Machiavellian politics applied to the psychology of attraction. Because the body, before the mouth, is already a declaration of power. And deep down, this entire philosophy has a greater purpose: to free men from emotional neediness. Attraction is a reflection of self-image, and Machiavelli would teach that those who do not govern their own inner realm will be governed by the reactions of others. The woman who senses this in you, the feeling that nothing shakes you, that you are master of your own rhythm, will be naturally attracted. Because where there is security, there is curiosity. Where there is scarcity, there is value. And where there is virtù, there is magnetism. The man who understands this begins to transform not only how he is seen, but what he emits. And it is precisely there that the next step reveals itself, learning to change the way he is perceived, both in the digital world and in real life. Machiavelli would say that first impressions are the soul of power. But in love, politics, and business, those who master perception dominate the outcome. And the curious thing is that almost no one realizes how trapped they are by their own outdated image. That self, shaped by past mistakes, old insecurities, or even versions of themselves that no longer exist. Transforming the way you are perceived isn't about pretending to be someone else, but about projecting who you've truly become. It's politics guided by reality, not ideals. It's not about lying, it's about polishing. What you publish, the way you speak, the way you walk, the silence you maintain, it all communicates. Even what you don't say is part of the strategy. In the digital world, the most common mistake is to believe that authenticity is the same as exposure. It isn't. Machiavelli would teach that not every secret needs to be revealed, nor every virtue needs to be displayed. The intelligent man understands that the appearance of virtue is often more effective than the virtue itself. It's the difference between being admired and being forgotten. A well-constructed online profile isn't vanity, it's strategic territory. It's like a prince's castle. It should inspire respect, curiosity, and desire. Choose photos that convey power and purpose. Show routine, not ostentation. Show literacy, not neediness. Show direction, not pursuit. Because the end justifies the means, and in the digital world, the means is the image that precedes the word. But true power isn't limited to the screen. In real life, the body speaks first, and that's where the calculated use of force manifests itself. The man who controls his tone of voice, his gaze, and the pace of his speech creates a presence that speaks for him. This is leadership psychology applied to attraction. Want a practical example? Walk into a room and speak 30% slower than everyone else, not to appear arrogant, but so that each word seems intentional. This small adjustment changes perception immediately, because the human mind associates calm with dominance and dominance with valor. This is virtù in action, mastery of the environment without apparent effort. Transforming perception also requires understanding the role of controlled vulnerability. Machiavelli said that a prince should be loved and feared, but never hated. The same applies to relationships. Being perceived as too unattainable creates distance. Being overly accessible destroys mystery. Balance lies in leaving human gaps within a solid framework. Talking about failures with humor, admitting mistakes lightly, and laughing at oneself strategically, all of this sparks connection without breaking the magnetism. It's the same game of light and shadow that power has always played, revealing enough to attract, hiding enough to intrigue. And the most fascinating thing is that when you change your external perception, the world changes how it reacts to you. Not because people see something new, but because you've become something new. Fortune, that force Machiavelli described as unstable, begins to conspire in favor of those who display virtù. And when you master this silent game, something curious happens. Desire ceases to be a pursuit and becomes a reflex. This is where true power is born. The power to make someone think of you without you having to do anything. And that's exactly what the next principle addresses: the art of psychological attractiveness and the subtle manipulation of interest. True attraction is not born of beauty, but of enigma. And this is where Machiavelli would smile again. He knew that power lies not in those who reveal too much, but in those who know how to measure what they reveal. Psychological attractiveness is the calculated use of emotional force, the mastery of what is said and what is left hanging. People desire what they don't fully understand. Therefore, mystery is one of the oldest weapons of politics and seduction. Politics, guided by reality, not ideals, understands that human beings seek not the best, but the most intriguing. A predictable man awakens comfort, but not fascination. One who always seems to keep a secret ignites a woman's imagination before he even opens his mouth. Gentle manipulation of interest isn't playing with feelings, it's playing with perceptions. It's like moving pieces on an emotional board where each gesture has psychological meaning. A simple example: those who demonstrate total availability create the feeling that their time is worthless. Those who manage presence and absence create scarcity, and scarcity is the mother of desire. Machiavelli would call this virtù, the talent for shaping the behavior of others without resorting to force. It's like a leader who doesn't need to shout to be obeyed. The man who understands this stops seeking attention and starts generating curiosity. He doesn't chase after it. He simply shifts the field of gravity. He makes the other person orbit around him. The human mind is attracted to subtle contradictions. Machiavelli would say that a prince must appear compassionate, yet be firm, appear simple, yet think strategically. The same principle applies to attraction. Be kind, but not submissive. Be present, but not predictable. Be attentive, but never needy. This duality creates a psychological magnetism that confuses and enchants. It's the silent game where the end justifies the means. Not because you want to control the other, but because you want to preserve the balance of desire. In a world where everyone reveals too much of themselves, power lies with those who hold something back. And this, curiously, makes the other person want to discover more. One of the modern mistakes is to think that transparency is synonymous with truth. It isn't. Truth is awareness. Total transparency is exposure. The Machiavellian man understands that mystery isn't a lie, it's a limit, and limits are the foundation of respect. Want a practical example? Talk less about yourself. Let the other person ask questions. When you tell something, end with a pause, not an explanation. Use silence as a tool for tension. It's a type of power that doesn't require performance, only intention. A woman who realizes she hasn't completely figured you out enters a psychological loop that makes her think about you, even when she doesn't want to. And this is the beginning of subtle domination, not of the person, but of the narrative. And as this energy grows, the dynamic reverses. What was once a pursuit becomes attraction. What was once an effort becomes a naturalness. The man who masters psychological attractiveness understands that desire is a dance of distances. It comes close enough to be felt, but far enough away to be remembered. And it is at this point of tension that the silent power Machiavelli so admired emerges. Control disguised as casualness. But there is still one step higher, the moment when she stops waiting for your message and starts acting. And that's where the fourth rule comes in, making her chase you. Machiavelli said that a wise prince must lead his subjects so that they always need him. The same logic applies to attraction. Those who are necessary become irresistible. Making a woman chase you isn't about gross manipulation, but about becoming indispensable in her emotional realm. The mistake most people make is thinking that attracting someone means insisting, when in fact it means creating space for the other person to move toward you. Politics is guided by reality, not ideals. Human nature seeks what it doesn't possess and values what it doesn't understand. A man who positions himself with presence, but not in haste, arouses curiosity and respect is the soil where desire flourishes. It's important to understand that chasing isn't physical, it's mental. It's not about pursuit, but imagination. When a woman thinks about you without understanding why, when she revisits your messages and wonders if she did something wrong, you're already in control of the plot. It's the calculated use of psychological force. Not a force of imposition, but of strategic absence. Machiavelli would call this the mastery of appearances, the power to control emotions without ever showing that you're doing so. It's like the general who retreats only to let the enemy advance too far, and then he's lost. The man who understands this dynamic doesn't need to prove anything. He simply watches the field naturally tilt in his favor. The art is in creating contrast. When you give attention, it should feel like a privilege. When you withdraw, it should feel like a choice, not a lack of interest. This is the balance between virtù and fortuna, acting with precision but leaving room for chance. A woman chases those who challenge her to feel alive. She pursues mystery, not predictability. That's why the mistake of good guys is to offer themselves as a complete manual, while the strategist offers only the preface. What's more, the power of unpredictability is that it doesn't need to be manufactured. It arises from authenticity. When you truly have a purpose, goals, friends, reading, and direction, the focus shifts. You stop revolving around someone else and start revolving around yourself. And this, paradoxically, is what attracts most. Want a practical example? Imagine she sends you a message and you respond directly, but without lingering. Instead of, "Good morning, beautiful," just say, "Good morning, warrior," and then disappear. Silence creates tension. Scarcity creates value. This isn't arrogance, it's strategy. The end justifies the means when the goal is to generate healthy desire, the kind born of fascination, not need. And that's precisely why Machiavelli recommended avoiding being hated, because power is lost when the other feels humiliated. The art lies in withdrawing without hurting, in provoking without breaking, in making the other miss you without realizing they've been led to do so. And when she finally starts chasing, the game changes direction. Now your role is not to win, but to maintain balance. Machiavelli would say, "It is easier to conquer than to maintain a kingdom." The same goes for desire. Maintaining tension requires pacing, emotional reading, and subtlety. You need to know when to offer tenderness and when to restore mystery. And at this point, the ultimate challenge of Machiavellian attraction arises, balancing strength and vulnerability. Because without vulnerability, power becomes cold, and without strength, vulnerability becomes weakness. It is precisely this duality that the next topic will reveal. Machiavelli understood the human paradox. Absolute power without empathy is tyranny, but empathy without structure is weakness, and this same balance applies to the field of attraction. Strength and vulnerability are the two poles of emotional magnetization. The man who only demonstrates strength becomes a wall, respected but unreachable. The man who shows himself too vulnerable becomes a mirror, understood but without fascination. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, teaches that balance is true virtù. It is the ability to show humanity without losing poise and authority without losing warmth. This contrast creates a psychological gravitational field where respect and desire coexist, feeding off each other. In practice, Strength is self-control, the ability to react less and observe more. Vulnerability is authenticity, the courage to expose yourself without seeking pity. The Machiavellian man understands that mastering one's own temperament is more seductive than dominating another. He speaks little, but each word carries weight. He shows affection, but never becomes predictable. This is because the end justifies the means, when the means is the silence that makes you think, the gesture that leaves a mark, the look that penetrates. A practical example: a brief but precise compliment can have more impact than a long statement. "You have something few have," and then silence, no emoji, no explanation. Just presence. Mystery sets in, and respect is born from what is left unsaid. Vulnerability, when used well, is a demonstration of power, not fragility. Admitting fear, loneliness, or doubt doesn't diminish one's worth. It increases it, as long as it's done with awareness. It's the calculated use of emotional strength. Machiavelli would say that the wise prince shows wounds but doesn't bleed in public. The man who shares pain calmly and humorously reveals depth. This generates empathy, but also curiosity, because the feminine unconscious recognizes the value of those who feel but don't crumble. It's the balance between armor and heart, between the general and the poet. And in this game, desire arises not from what you offer, but from what you contain. Strength protects, vulnerability connects. When a woman feels she can trust you, but doesn't possess you, the duality that most stirs the unconscious arises. Security and challenge at the same time. It's like a ruler who inspires love without ceding the throne, avoiding being hated, but never becoming predictable. This is the epitome of Machiavellian power. In attraction, this means being emotionally available, but selective. Listening, but not confessing everything. Showing interest, but keeping your mission a priority. It's this internal hierarchy that makes you desirable. Because deep down, what seduces most isn't the body or the words. It's the aura of someone who lives for something greater than their own ego. And the most intriguing thing is that when this balance manifests, the game of attraction ceases to be a game. It becomes art. The man who understands his own duality creates magnetism effortlessly. His presence is enough. And when he speaks, the world pays attention. The woman realizes she is not before a character, but a living force, disciplined and at the same time deeply human. This fusion of firmness and sensitivity is the pinnacle of virtù, the mark of one who has understood their own power. Because, in the end, what truly attracts is not those who try to conquer the other, but those who have learned to govern themselves. And it is in this awareness that the entire art of silent attraction ends, only to be reborn in each meeting of eyes. In the end, Machiavelli wasn't talking about political power. He was talking about self-mastery. And every man who understands this stops being a piece and becomes the player. Attraction, deep down, was never about conquering women, but about conquering one's own center. Because when you govern yourself, the world responds. When you stop begging for attention, you start receiving it. And when you understand that the end justifies the means, as long as the end is self-respect, you become unattainable. Now that you know the 5 Machiavellian rules of attraction, the question is, will you continue to act on instinct, or will you start acting on strategy? Will you continue trying to please, or will you learn to generate value through your presence? True power begins when you stop chasing and start becoming the kind of man silence can't erase. Women don't chase the body, they chase the energy of those who know who they are. And that's what separates the ordinary from the unforgettable. So apply what you learned today. Observe, test, refine. Don't look for immediate results, look for transformation. And when you notice that attention has started to come effortlessly, remember, this is not luck. It is virtù. It is the power that is born of consciousness. If this video opened your mind, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications and continue learning with me about the real game, that of mind, energy and presence. Because the man who understands Machiavelli never again needs to be understood to be desired.